Hi everyone, welcome to State of Play. I'm your host Brandon Bales, and this is the only video games interview show where we dare to ask your favorite game designer if we could borrow their car. The topic of the show is not games as art, but art as games. And I'm sitting here with a great person to speak about this with, one Kellee Santiago, president of That Game Company, creators of some of the most excellent and iconic games of the past generation. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Kellee.
Thank you. Wow, thanks that.
You're welcome. You guys are a fantastic company who are really kind of pushing the boundaries of gaming.
Thanks a lot. That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
It's it can be really brutal work.
Yeah, feeling like a softly whispering child in a room full of screaming monsters. I mean, maybe not a child, but it's definitely, your games definitely, like go at it in the soft sell, sort of perspective.
Yeah. It can be, I mean, we've been doing it now. We just celebrated our 5th birthday as a company. And I have to say, certainly at events at like E3, it can be a little, I guess it feels a little like you're trying to get your voice heard. We just really, the goal of That Game Company has always been to really make an impact on the market, to change the way everyone around the world thinks about video games, but then also hopefully encourage other developers and publishers to fund and put the resources into making different kinds of games. And not that I'm not super stoked about some of the stuff that's being announced at E3.
Naturally.
I can't wait for Uncharted 3D, but I just want to see a wider variety in that emotional spectrum, which has always been our mission. So in 5 years, I don't know, I hope we've made some impact. I, of course, hope that it were more.
Wow. Well, you've got off to a great start, and it's been, from my understanding, a kind of meteoric rise, if you will. I mean, for someone who's so critically acclaimed, just coming out of school, you guys, have had a lot of great traction, with your work. So, and I'm correct in assuming that you and Genova, the co-founder, met at school, right, at USC?
That's right, yeah. We met at the USC Interactive Media Division.
Cool.
And he actually initially applied for the animation program, but he had some game development and had computer science background, and so they invited him to apply to this new program. And I was coming from theater.
Right.
And was coming into interactive media as far as being interested in interactive media and digital media when it came to live performance.
Cool.
But in our first year there, in the second semester, we took this course on history of game design throughout human history. And in addition, that semester, actually both of us went to our first game developers conference, and just sort of those two things together really opened our eyes up to the creative possibility of games, but then also the culture of game making, which was and continues to be just really enticing and exciting. They're just some of the coolest, smartest people that I've met.
If I could step back for a second, what was your theater background? Like, what were you doing in theater for?
What was I doing in theater?
were you performing? Were you directing, writing?
A little bit of everything. I definitely was gravitating more towards production. I really loved to bring people together, and also creating original work. So like not the remounting of old plays necessarily, but seeing a fresh idea taken from the very beginning to completion, and rallying a group of people around that.
That's such an interesting transition. You don't hear every day that people are coming from that sort of background, and I think that shows in your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also due to the rise of programs like the USC Interactive Media Program, DigiPen, Full Sail, Carnegie Mellon, all these, which when I started in 2003 at USC, I mean, that was just unheard of. Actually, what was it, the year Genova and I graduated, as we were coming to E3 talking to Sony about potentially working with them for the PlayStation Network, there actually was a talk, and I unfortunately don't remember who it was, but they were saying how sort of studying games in academia was totally irrelevant and going to have no impact at all.
Wow.
So yeah, maybe we've changed that, so that would be nice.
I would hope so. So you and Genova met in school, and as you were working on his thesis project, you decided to work together, and you worked together on that project, right, on Cloud? Is that right?
Yeah, Cloud was actually in progress when Genova contacted me sort of towards the last phase of it, when production was wrapping up, and then there was all sort of this work to do in submitting it to festivals and getting the website up and all that stuff. And he knew that I was looking to get more experience with game teams. And so even though our program was very small and like we'd worked around each other, I don't know, for some reason with Cloud, and I think maybe the nature of the work that we were doing as far as working together to articulate what was special about Cloud and how we would talk about it when we went to festivals and conferences, doing these pitches for publishers, which were initially just as an exercise for the two of us, that we realized that we were real kindred spirits. Cool. And we really enjoyed working together, and that's an experience neither one of us had much of, I guess.
Oh, wow, great.
Like really that I don't know, that's when you feel like really in sync with someone. And
that's awesome.
Worked out really well. Definitely one thing that everyone says is you should really trust the people you start a company with, and with Genova it's come to light over and over and over again. That's so important.
Yeah. So you guys founded the company like after you left school, right? Is that pretty much okay?
Kind of right at the same time.
Okay.
So yeah, I would describe, especially at that time, that Genova and I were really opportunistic more than anything else. So EA had given the grant initially to do the project, to do the game innovation project, under which Cloud, happened.
Okay.
And so it was somehow came about that we would do a pitch to some of the executives at EA for a Cloud console project, mainly to practice our pitching skills and be able to, what we were thinking is kind of better than a job interview. Like here was an opportunity, instead of coming in and answering specific questions, we were going to get like an hour of dedicated time from people that would never normally speak with us, really. And maybe that's not true, but they're very uncommon. So we started there, and as a result, we had this pitch deck that we could show to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And so Cloud was accepted into the student showcase at the Independent Game Festival at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco that year, 2006. And we got a lot of attention. I think the color palette of Cloud really helped, because you were looking at all these, the Independent Game Festival showcase, and there was just this bright blue that really attracted a lot of people. And some of them were people from publishers, and so we would talk to them about our idea for potentially doing it. We just kept sort of, if someone asked if they wanted to hear about, would you be interested in doing this on console, then we would take them up on that offer. That led us to talking with the folks at Sony Santa Monica. So
did they begin to fund Flow, the next game, or was that something that came sort of from another direction? Something that was that like a side project for a while, something before they decided to, make it a PSN title? Yeah,
it kind of was a little bit of both. When we were talking to them, they were really interested in doing a multi-game deal. That certainly started coming about as a part of our conversations with them. At that time, funding a bunch of students for a new project and the downloadable space as a whole, these are all new concepts. And so a lot of the people we were talking to were like, we love your idea. We can see that you can execute on a student project, but you've never done a commercial product before, and we don't know what to do with you. And there was ideas of maybe hiring us. And anyways, so so the 3-game deal, incubation deal, kind of came up out of that, sort of this idea that we wouldn't necessarily have to worry as much about, the next game or what was coming around the corner. We would kind of know where that was coming from. And also being incubated in their offices would allow us to really benefit from being exposed to them, as well as allow them to sort of keep a close eye on us through that process. The Flow Flash game, Genova developed along with our designer, Nick Clark, who is working at That Game Company now. They did it as a part of Genova's thesis on applying flow theory to game design. And so that happened while we were talking to Sony, and the Flash Flow got a lot of hits, and sort of as we were talking around the possibility of this next game, it kind of became apparent that Cloud was less finished really as a game than Flow was. It was much simpler. There was a lot more there already in the prototype as far as gameplay. And so it would be a better choice for us doing our first title using that as the jumping off point. Which turned out to be the right decision, for sure. I mean, it was like shipping the first commercial title is just as crazy as everyone says it is, and probably more so because you're thinking, oh, but I'll do it better, or I can work faster, or I don't need as much sleep, or whatever it is, and it's true. It's just really, really, really hard.
Oh man! So you guys, I mean, we're really lucky to have landed that deal with Sony. Flow was coming up.
Yeah.
But you mentioned flow theory. This is one of Genova's theories?
No, it's a psychological theory from a man called a Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Had to make sure I was getting that right. But the theory of flow comes from hundreds of interviews that he did with people about basically trying to figure out what is happiness and what is fun, essentially. Like what is that really? Sort of the first step towards then talking about, and then how can we obtain it more often? And so what he discovered was often people would describe these periods of time of sort of total bliss as feeling like you were being just carried through water. So that's where the name of it came from, flow. But it's that feeling when you're engaged in an activity like writing late at night and you're just jamming. And what does jamming mean? It's like, and he spells it out, that includes, you forget basic needs like hunger, you lose track of time, and that what flow is a balance between the challenge and your ability. So if something is too difficult for the amount of ability that you have, you'll find it really frustrating and give up. And if something's too easy, then you'll find it really boring and also give up. And a lot of game design is around. I mean, Grand Theft Auto actually is a great example of flow theory, where through the core activity of the game, which is driving, you can select an experience that is appropriate to whatever mood you're in that moment, as opposed to choosing easy, medium, difficult, or as your setting. It's like you're getting to choose for yourself what kind of experience you want. Yeah, so Flow, the Flash game, is a really basic implementation of it that was put on the web as a playtest experiment to see how people would react. So in it, you're this very simple aquatic organism, and you, through the act of eating, do everything that you need to do and make choices in the game. So you can choose to go deeper into more complex levels, or also choose to go deeper just to bypass levels. You can choose to stay up at easier levels, engage in combat or not.
Is this a theory that you all have wanted to carry on through each game? Like, do you guys reference it, or is it something that you've kind of put aside, or that was that part of that project and no others?
Oh no, it's definitely at the core of our design process, for sure. It's it came up as Genova's thesis because we found that with Cloud, the content of Cloud being this game about a child trapped in a hospital who daydreams he can fly through the clouds really resonated with a large group of people, including people who had never played video games before, and even including very hardcore gamers. But it wasn't hitting a lot of them because in some instances for core gaming it would be too simplistic, or the controls were too obtuse. And likewise with people who never played games before. So it was sort of like, if we want to make games, if the mission was to make games that had content that appealed to a wide variety of people, how could we ensure that the fundamental mechanics of the game would also be appealing to a wide variety of people? To ultimately you want to make engaging experiences. I think that's the point.
When you guys were moving on, then, or when you were coming up with this 3-game deal for Sony, Did you ever think about going back to cloud, or and maybe reworking it, or was it something that said, well, we did that, it's done, and maybe we're not so interested in that anymore?
We think about cloud a lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
not to belittle it at all.
Yeah, no. I mean, it definitely is still really inspiring to think about it. I think on every business trip that Genova and I take, we still take pictures outside the window of our airplane. So I don't know what will happen with it.
Okay, cool.
But it's still special to us.
Yeah. I downloaded it last week in anticipation of our meeting, and
did it run?
It did.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It did, and I was really. It's amazing how clear from the moment it begins that it was a That Game Company game. I mean, it has a lot. It's very similar in style to Flower, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, the kind of fun fact that the composer Vincent Diamante, who did the soundtrack for Flower, also did the soundtrack for Cloud.
Cool. So, I understand that That Game Company, when they're creating, is attempting to make a player feel. That's where you all want to start, right? With a certain emotion, and then kind of brainstorm from there, and go and approach the game that way. Did that come along with the flow theory, or was that something that you and Genova had talked about as you were working together at the beginning, or did that become a mission statement when you first formed the company? How has that come about?
It really, I think, came initially from Tracy Fullerton, who's a professor at USC, who has a fantastic book I'll mention here, which is The Game Design Workshop.
Okay.
And it's all about iterative game design and just rapid prototyping and that kind of process. But her vocabulary always roots it in sort of what are the initial goals of the project. And I think having the interactive media division housed in the School of Cinematic Arts at USC, certainly, I guess there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Which is the stance that game design and video game development is another form of another creative medium.
Right.
And when we talk about creative medium, that always comes back to, well, what is that thing that the creation, and what is it you're trying to communicate?
Right. What are you attempting to give to your audience, or someone else? So it's sort of been ingrained in the whole experience. It's sort of been a natural through line with the company.
Yeah.
I'd say cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think how it's evolved in the specific process of That Game Company is early on in a project, there's usually a few ideas about the feeling, the environment that the game will take place in, but also considering the technology, considering our resource limitations with having a small team, and not wanting to spend a lot, trying to make economic decisions so that our games can be commercially successful. And we just go around and around and around and around, and then it just starts, I don't know, this thing, it's like maybe boiling water and distilling it, and it suddenly starts to take this specific flavor and shape and color.
Right.
And then it's interesting because at a certain point in development, and I think a lot of game developers will speak to this, is it becomes this game that's then out there. It's like the sculpture, within the stone. It becomes like this thing that everyone all of a sudden knows, it's calling to them, and then you're answering that call. Right,
and then you kind of lose control, but you just have to do the work that it takes to make this happen.
Right, then it becomes outside of any one person on the team, and it's this other thing that we're all aiming towards.
It's kind of a holy moment, if you will. That's great.
It is. It's really magical.
So I want to get to your new project, but I still want to talk about Flower some. And I mean, if you are attempting to make a player feel a certain emotion, was there one in particular that you wanted for Flower?
Yeah, it started with the idea of creating a game that made you feel like you were in a giant field of flowers, and what that feeling was. Genova, when he moved to California from Shanghai. And so he had never seen, he never really left Shanghai and had never really seen anything like the rural areas of California, especially when you're driving from like San Francisco to Los Angeles.
Right.
And he was really inspired to try and capture that. And so we thought, well, what if we could make a game where it felt like you could escape through your PlayStation 3 into your own sort of garden, or this giant field of flowers.
Cool.
Yeah, and then it comes to then you have all the questions like, well, what does that feel like? Like how do we make that?
Right.
I think when you look at Flower, it's easy to think that somehow we conceived of that game from the very beginning, which was definitely not the case. I mean, we were searching and wandering for a long time before we found it.
How many? Can you say, was it like a year of actually tossing around ideas and prototyping, like before the
Yeah, I mean it was all told from like the very first, the idea of let's make a game that captures the feeling in nature to shipping the game was 2 years. And I would say it was about a year until we got we were prototyping gameplay on XNA and building out the environment on the PlayStation 3. And it was about a year until we had something that was like just moving around this field of grass and some flowers in it. And maybe another 6 months until we actually had the game that you play today.
Wow.
So 18 months out of 2 years is a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know how long or how short the creation process is going to be,
Yeah, I mean, I think I see on the development team now more confidence in that. I mean, that process of just searching in the darkness can be really terrifying when you're not sure if you're ever going to make it out.
Right. Like, we work for Sony.
Yeah. There's a reason people don't make games about flowers. It's really hard. It turns out. I feel like so often that's like the discovery process of that game company. It's like, oh, that's why, like Flow has no real menu system in it. And it was really hard to every time, we had to think about, well, we want this fully integrated menu system into the world of the game, and making these decisions. I don't know, a lot of times the seemingly simple solution or the elegant solution is the hardest one to execute on.
Well, if I can speak to my own tastes, I definitely feel like Flower accomplishes its story, or its narrative structure extremely well, in as much as I'm a huge fan of explaining the bare minimum to get someone involved, and I feel like what is so effective about that game is that there is so little, that's told to the player, and I'm a big fan of like the Half-Life series and stuff because of that. You don't know what's really going on perchance, but that's why you feel like around every corner there's going to be some new discovery or something,
Yeah.
And that's what I think is one of the things that's really amazing that you guys did and achieved in the game, is that you're not really sure if there is a story or anything, but it's the emotions and the music and everything together are so evocative that there is sort of a progression, even with the menu and seeing the cityscape and seeing the the buds and how they bloom and everything inside the house. It's great, the contrast, and yes. Good
cool.
job.
I was getting chills listening to that. That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something we struggle with over development process. We want to set that tone, communicate that emotion or that story, but we don't want to force feed it to the player, and we want to leave it open enough so that anywhere in the world, regardless of their background or age or video game history, could get something out of it.
People play it who are young and old, and people who would normally play games. I think it really is a great entry into the idea of interactive entertainment, interactive storytelling. I actually have a funny personal anecdote to share about that.
Okay.
I have a good friend who plays games with me sometimes, but really is not much of a gamer. And steel thyself for this. I'm gonna I might drop a potential bomb here.
Okay.
He came over to my house and I said, check out this great game I got, and he said, what is it? And I said, you play the wind and you blow some petals around. And he said, what? And I said, just play it. And I say steel yourself because he picked it up and he played it for about 2 seconds and said, this is gay. Yeah. And I said, just play the game. And he started, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. Just play it. And sure enough, he played it and was kind of, wow. And then I was in New York a week later for doing business, and he, I talked to him, how's it going out there? How was your ex, and or how was your thing that you're doing? Oh, great. And he's like, dude, when are you coming back? And I said, why? And he said, I want to play the flower game again.
Really?
He's like,
wow.
He said, I've been thinking about it a lot. It's just so cool. Like, it's just so relaxing and excellent. So it's funny that it has that effect on people.
Yeah, well, I think both of the sort of examples you just gave of like people who don't normally play video games and do play flower, and then the hardcore gamers who are initially very resistant. And I've gotten emails from people saying exactly that same story, like totally thought it was lame, thought I was going to hate it, and then I really enjoyed it. I think both of those experiences are just the ideal experience we were hoping for,
right.
I guess, but like maybe just secretly hoping for and not really expecting. So it's just totally blown us away.
Right. Let me step back for 1 second and talk about like playtesting. Like when you guys were doing Flower, did you have to feel like you were going to bend a lot to suit Joe Gamer? When you first started showing it to people and doing play sessions, and like, was there a checklist that said, okay, this is too obtuse, like this is crazy, how are we going to do this? This needs to change. Like these guys aren't getting it.
Yeah, well, it's like you want to make an engaging experience. With
right.
people, I always say, like, if you've designed a game but no one's playing it, like, are you really a game developer?
Right.
And the audience is so integral to the whole game development process and validation, but especially in what I think in determining if you've made a successful game or not. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I think one of the biggest concerns with Flower is that it was going to be really boring. So early prototypes of Flower included mechanics that involved resource gathering. Like you would hit different flowers and get different abilities. Oh, wow. And then you would have to use those abilities or daisy chain them, I guess pun intended there, to execute in different things. What I think steered Flower ultimately in the right direction was that we did have that emotional goal at the beginning, right? What does it feel like to be in the middle of a field of flowers? Right. And so as we're playtesting, which we do at least once every other week from the very beginning of development, as we're having people play these various prototypes, and we're hearing them say, like, shit, fuck, God, that's not the feeling of being in the middle of flowers. So we had to go back to the drawing board and rethink that. It's also one of the big challenges in creating games that attempt to express different emotions is there's very little to reference. So we can't lean a lot on games that have already been done. I actually was one of your playtesters. Coincidentally, I've never playtested any other game. And really?
Randomly, 3 years ago, when I first had moved to LA, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I work with this company sometimes. You want to, get in with them?" I was like, okay. They called me up one day. "Do you want to come to this thing? $50 or whatever it was."
Who was that?
My friend.
Yeah. Like who?
This guy named...
because it was, you actually came in for a focus test.
Yeah, focus test. Yes.
So when they come in and pay, because we have a lot of play testers we don't pay.
Okay. You're like, who paid you?
We feed them pizza. Okay, so you came into Sony Santa Monica.
Yeah. It was the one and only time I've ever done that. It's so funny that this was that game.
You weren't the player that wouldn't press the acceleration button, were you?
No.
There was somebody who, because you try and be totally hands-off in focus testing.
Right.
And you know that the Sony Santa Monica setup's great because it's in a separate room that you have video into. So you're watching their faces and you're watching their screens as well in a remote location. And but every now and again, especially when we're earlier on, it's like basic control stuff. It's because we don't have clear instructions. Right. Like when we're playtesting that kind of stuff, sometimes you can just tell the player doesn't get it, and you're like, okay, well, this is going to be a waste of playtest if we don't tell them now. So we'll interrupt it and we'll kind of taint it a little bit. But there was someone in Flower, you press any button in order to blow the wind. Right. And otherwise, you're slowly moving, but it's in this like really slow, like everything's blurred out and the sound's kind of like like that. And he's almost at the end of the level and like has not pressed the acceleration button. Oh my God. And we're like, oh God, he just didn't get it. So we go up, we send somebody up there and we're like, just so you know, you press the button to go. He goes, oh no, I know that. I'm just really loving playing like this. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Enjoy your afternoon.
Yeah. He's like, now I'm going to walk back downtown.
Yeah. So he was really, having a great day.
That's so awesome. Wow. Well, that was a really amazing experience for me. Like considering that was the first game test I ever went in, and I was like, I had no idea what it was. I was going in for it, and I showed up and.
Yeah, a lot of people think they're coming in for God of War because they developed that over there.
Right. So. Oh, that I think I did have that thought too, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And
oh, that's so cool.
But I felt weird about it because I was the only person in the room who I think was like extremely excited about the concept, I guess. And I'm pretty sure Genova was there, and we all had our forms, and I was writing down everything, and it was like, great game, oh man, wow, how new and cool, And then Genova's like, I could tell he's like hard at work. He's like, okay, what did you guys think about this? How was this clear? And I'm like, it comes to me, and I'm like, man, I just want to say, what a great thing. And he's like, all right, cool, yeah. He's like,
that's Genova.
He's like, I get it. I don't know, but how is this? Dude with backwards baseball cap. How are you? I mean, that's
we had a test recently for Journey with a bunch of friends who went to school with one of our lead artists. And Genoa was like, oh yeah, they're gonna be totally brutal like artists because they're not gonna hold back any punches. And for the most part, they really loved it.
Oh, cool.
And then afterwards, he's like, nah, they were like, he totally found some reason to dismiss all of their opinions. Like, oh, it didn't. They weren't really paying attention.
Well, I always think a great artist too is seldom completely satisfied. There's always room for improvement. Which is a sign of a person who's driven, at least at the very least.
I mean, that's why I do love working with Genova. Is he, I think, pushes himself and thereby really challenges everyone else too. Can you be doing it just a little bit better, a little bit harder? Yeah.
You guys are you're well into the process of creating a new game now. How long has it been in development?
It's been in development just over 2 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. And
it's a long time for us.
Yeah. Wow. And do you see it? I mean, it's 2011 right now. Do you see it shipping this year? Maybe next year? Do you know? I mean, is that?
Yeah, we don't know
something?
yet.
Okay. Cool. Good. Excellent. So you, and from what I understand, you have worked as a producer on the past couple of games for Sony and for that game company. And it's my understanding that you are not actually a producer on Journey on this new game, and you sort of stepped fully into your role as president of the company. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes and no. We of course with a small team, like we had, I think we averaged about 7 people on Flower, and Journey's been about 11-ish, 11, 12. you do a lot of, everyone kind of does a lot of different roles, but actually it was just earlier this year that we realized that we had sort of been evolving along, not a traditional hierarchy, but maybe more of, like role definitions, and really decided it just wasn't working out for us that well, and decided to demolish all of our roles and titles.
Oh, wow, great.
And go back to being a totally flat organization. So
that's cool.
I would say that, I'm doing more executive and especially communication stuff, talking with the press and shaping the messaging around that game company internally and externally. But that's because that's what I really love to do, and I'm really passionate about it. And at the same time, I'm in design meetings, and designers feed into our messaging, and so as far as the production, especially when it comes to producing and management, we've started to distribute that among like everyone on the team.
Cool. Am I correct in assuming that does Valve do the same thing? I feel like
they do.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, we actually got to meet with them, a couple of their core members, some of the people who've been there from the beginning, or almost the beginning, earlier this year, and so it was something that we had been thinking about quite. I mean, we think about our own process quite a lot, and how to improve upon it, and how to keep making great games for the rest of our lives. And they were amazing. I mean, they literally sat with us in a room all day long and just answered every question we had about.
Wow.
So, a lot of companies talk about that stuff. Like DreamWorks says they're flat, but they're not really flat. Like there is an internal like hierarchy sheet, and you never know the publicity like from the reality. And with them, it's real. It is really how they operate, and it's pretty awesome.
That's amazing.
So we were really inspired and really thankful that we were able to get that firsthand information.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's helped. I mean, you've used a lot of what they've said to, kind of shape your own. Yeah.
I mean, they warned us. They said they have had other people come in and have similar turnarounds, and then it just totally melted down their studio.
Wow.
Because it's a tough thing. I mean, it's not like, I think, and we asked them a lot about this, about the considerations of the decision-making process when there's no specific accountability, and what happens, at least I should say my perception of what happens is that there are roles, just as I was saying, like I do a lot of the publicity for that game company, but it's something that is sort of decided collectively almost. It's like I want to do this, and the team supports me in doing that, and so it shifts from decision to decision and from project to project. But
so tell us about Journey, if you can. Are you comfortable talking about the big idea behind that one, a sort of emotion that that you might have already talked about? I mean, without spoiling anything, or what? How? First of all, where are you in that sense? Like, how much are you saying to people right now about what you're working on?
Well, we certainly. It's tough. It's a tough line to walk with that game company games, because a lot of our games, and especially with Journey, you have the obvious physical goal in the game, which is to get to this mountaintop. You wake up as this road character in a desert at the beginning of the game. You have no idea what's happened before you, and you just see the mountaintop. But the real goal of the game is to discover what has happened in this world, why you're there, and who you are. Wow. So we don't want to tell people about what they're going to find.
Great.
But also, I don't want to tell people how they should feel about it.
Sure. Okay.
Because it's cheating in a way.
Right, okay.
But also, like, I don't want to color that experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, what there's stuff we've talked about as far as our inspirations. I mean, certainly in thinking about that cycle of like the initial emotional inspiration plus the technology considerations and sort of where we were going round and round on at the beginning of Journey, was that we knew for the third title that we were going to make on PlayStation Network, we wanted it to be online. We hadn't done it before.
Right.
And how could we take what we had learned as far as crafting emotional experiences in Flow and Flower and applying that to an online experience?
Cool.
And so there was this concept Genova had been kicking around for a while of this kind of journey in which you discover story through exploring this vast environment and this sort of mysterious environment. Not an alien world, but a slightly alien.
Sure.
A slightly alien world,
Slightly
maybe.
alien world. Okay. Cool.
Not science fiction, but just different.
Right.
And the desert emerged as a setting. One of the reasons being it was something we hadn't done before, and we're always looking for ways to continually challenge ourselves as developers, because that's what we think is really exciting. And at the same time, that feeling of being small, in thinking about, especially in online games, so much of it has to do with executing power over each other and the environment, and start basically having a starting point being like, well, what if we made a game that didn't do that? You know, was the opposite of that, made you feel small in comparison to the world, and how would that change, or would it change the kind of connection you feel with another person when you encounter them online? So those are sort of the things that we started off with.
I remember reading something that you guys had played around with voice chat, or the idea of doing voice chat, and that ultimately you decided not to.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable talking about that? Like.
Sure. I mean, it's funny to hear about, because it must have been like, it was a long time ago. We were thinking about maybe doing voice chat. But it was pretty quickly tossed out, because two things that have sort of been driving a lot of the decisions around the online component, I should say, because it's not really multiplayer. It's not really like co-op or competitive, but the online experience. And those are one that the emphasis in Journey on that other person is that they are another person, and that's really it. It doesn't matter who they are. It just matters that they are human, and that is humanity. And the second is wanting to maintain an integrity in the experience itself, and not wanting to break the player from being in the world. And we just couldn't come up with a way to use voice chat that was technically feasible for us and that would like achieve that goal. Right.
I saw that decision as I was reading about the game and thinking about the sorts of games you all make, and I felt like it was probably a very smart one.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's definitely been, all of those decisions are very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So we're really anxious to have people experience and see what they think. For me personally, of course, it's really interesting, because I do find, like, when I'm online playing games, and oftentimes as soon as other players realize I'm a girl, which happens when I talk on my headset, which I rarely do, because when they find out, their behavior completely changes towards me as another player. So what if that wasn't the case? Right.
And on the same note, there's nothing, I really, I sometimes, depending on the game, enter a sort of, reverent state where I kind of, I really look to, I really start to, lose myself and feel a part of the world, and it sucks to be a part of a multiplayer game and just have someone kind of just be like, oh, let's go over here, or let's do this, oh, this is stupid, let's go do that, and you're like, man, it's so not my way, they're not on my wavelength right now. This is kind of, ruining it for me, the immersion I was feeling, so.
Yeah. The same when you see the PSN ID pop up. And
yeah.
420 lovers.
Right.
Like, that doesn't fit in Journey.
That's my handle.
Oh.
You see me online? Great. Well, great. I got to say, I'm obviously looking forward to the game, and really looking forward to what you guys have in store. So obviously, best of luck with that one. That's going to be really cool.
Thanks.
Do you see yourself? I mean, now that you guys are entering this third game with Sony, do you feel like, well, aside from the future of the company, since you've worked with Sony, has it been a great experience for you guys? Like, can you see yourself working with Sony, like, in the future after this contract is up? Like, what do you think? Have you thought about, as a company, what kind of contracts you're going to do in the future, or like what's the future like for you all?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that every time there's a round of press about Journey or any one of our games, we'll get a collection of emails into my inbox that ask, why isn't this available for another game?
Right.
Why isn't this available for Xbox? Why isn't it on iPhone? Like, I really want to play it. And of course, there's the answer, which is we're in an exclusive arrangement with Sony. But then, and I was just recently thinking about it, sort of answering these emails. It's hard for me to imagine in the time that Genova and I were going around pitching this crazy idea of I mean, our pitch started with like 20 minutes of Genova and I just talking about games and emotions, and like how we wanted to make games that express different emotions, and everyone was going to want to play them, and we were essentially going to change the world. And that in 2006, when we were doing that, and before most of the digital distribution platforms were even out, like, I don't know, it's just hard to imagine like Flow and Flower and Journey really existing anywhere else. They've been a good partner.
Good. Is there something in Sony's philosophy, or there's something, the way that they do business, or is there an idea of Sony that meshes with who you are as a company?
I think they really lean on their developers a lot to provide entertainment content that will prove the hardware. But other than that, they don't give you a lot of mandates and direction on how to do that. So they really leave it up to the developer.
Get hands off.
That's not to say they haven't, we haven't had our fair share of heavy debates.
Right.
But at the end of them, they will back us in what we want to do. And I think that's a hard quality to find in general. But if you can think about like us asking for money to make a game about what it would feel like to be in the middle of a field of flowers, and that we wanted to spread love and goodwill through it, like, that's, I think, an exceptional thing.
I agree with you.
Yeah. They don't get enough credit for that. That's okay. I had that same experience. And I'm sure there were some of the Sony executives going home at night being like, that's so gay. But they still did it.
Yeah. Wiping tears from their eyes. So wrong. Oh, that's wonderful. Do you guys, since you've been downloadable, is there some sort of paradigm shift that would have to happen for you to make retail games? Like, is that out of the question ever? I mean, do you guys? I know no one wants to consider themselves, a downloadable company or something, that makes.
Why?
Well,
seems to work for Zynga, okay.
Well, sure, I guess so, yeah.
I think the shift would have to happen would be the internet breaks.
Oh, okay.
Because it's just it just allows for so much flexibility in the amount of content we distribute, the way we distribute it. You know, you have now the like freemium models, which are experimenting with all sorts of different ways to allow a much wider range and economic backgrounds of people to experience engaging interactive entertainment. There's just so much more possibility, I think. We don't have to put that pressure on ourselves to think about, okay, well, we have to sell this for $60 because the Blu-ray disc costs this, and the manufacturing goods, and we got to get it into the stores with the standees and blah blah blah.
Advertising.
So we have to charge this price, and now let's make a game that'll fit that price point. I think it's not. It's more difficult to stay true to an artistic process. With digital distribution, you can essentially be like, well, as long as we're keeping the cost fairly low, then we can figure out what the game is later, and then determine what the best way to distribute it is. So maybe one day we'll have, at the end of our couple of years, we'll have a game that's like, whoa, this is huge. Let's box it.
Exactly. Cool. Well, I think my one last question is about the logo of your company. And
how hard it is to make that hand actually silhouette, like
So where did that come from? I guess my take on it is it's someone trying to touch something, experience something, maybe reaching skyward. What's the idea behind it? What was the impetus for that exact design?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It was that sort of feeling like, I mean, we definitely wanted that sort of arc up.
Sweep,
the feeling of like reaching for something higher. And I think the colors were just sort of, the blue and white is soothing and sky-like.
Nice and cloud. Cool. I feel like I mentioned art as games earlier because I feel like that's where you all are coming from. I feel in a way, like bringing an idea and bringing it to fruition that happens to have these concepts in it. Are you comfortable being an emissary of this sort of idea?
It seems like I get a lot of YouTube views from it.
It's worth it.
I mean, not for my own popularity, but I mean, as someone who like grew up with games and believes in their expressive capabilities, and I do believe that games touch us in ways that no other medium can. I'm someone that learns by doing primarily, so I think for anyone like that, when you talk about an interactive medium, like the exponential impact it has on you emotionally and like viscerally, there's just no question. Like I pick up things better when I'm in the process of doing them. And that is the same for the emotions that are coming through in interactive experiences. To me, the important question there is, it's like, well, then what is our responsibility in that system? If we can recognize that games have a real impact on us and on other people, what do we want to be doing with that?
Designers have responsibilities, to make something that they believe in and really, think about what it is they're making as opposed to, okay, we got to sell this many units, and it's, I think this, doing this show already has like opened me up to that and for my, for my own, in my own mind, and that's been exciting. So,
I mean, the way games are going, they're so pervasive. Like, the way you play a Facebook game, in these short little bursts throughout your day, like that taking up like a certain amount of your mind space, and there, I think, are ways to use that to make the world a better place. I really believe that, and I hope to be an emissary for that. That would be really great.
Good. Well, I think so far you have been, and I can only assume that you will continue to be. So
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you for coming down for this interview. It really means a lot to me and to everybody here.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure.
Great. All right, well, thank you, Kellee Santiago. Thanks for joining us again. Thanks for watching State of Play. I'm Brandon Bales, and we'll see you next time.